So welcome back. We're learning the Nefesh HaHaim. We are in Sha'ar Dalet, and this evening we're in Perek Ches, the chapter 8. And this tonight he's taken sort of a 180, a turnaround. He's been talking about the importance of Yirat Shamayim. You can't just learn Torah. You have to also have Yirat Shamayim, realizing the importance and the unique quality of Limud Torah and how we're partners with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And now he's going to put boundaries on it, and it's fascinating. It's really sharp what he does. So here he begins with the words Omnam don mina nami me'inyan shnei mishalim shehem shilu zal. So we've talked about two analogies. One was building a storehouse, an otsar, a place to put your Torah. So you have to build a silo or a place that you can store all your stuff. And that storehouse is Yirat Shamayim. It's a place of the fear of God, recognizing who you are and where the Torah comes from and what this is all about. And then you can delve into the Torah and learn all the halachas. But you have to have a place to keep it. And that place is Yirat Shamayim. And then he had another mashal, which both of these are from Chazal, that you're putting, the actual produce like tavua, grain, into the silo. You have to put some preservative in with it. And the preservative is the Yirat Shamayim. So these are two metaphors that Chazal have used for the interplay between Yirat Shamayim, fear of God, and the actual Torah study. So till now, he's been emphasizing the importance of Yirat Shamayim, that you have to invest and give it its due, some time to contemplate Yirat Shamayim before you study, even in the midst of your studies, the amount of preservatives that you would put in to a grain storage facility. And he said even that you might think if you're putting some inedible preservative, you're stealing from the customer because they're not getting the right amount of grain. And that's not the case. In Choshen Mishpat, if you're selling grain and you say this is a liter of grain, you'll put some preservatives in there which are inedible, but that's also part of the deal because nobody wants to buy grain that's going to become rancid or rotten. You want to buy grain that's going to have a shelf life. So too with the Torah. You're involved in mitzvahs Talmud Torah, you're learning, but it's legitimate, appropriate, and necessary to give some time to the preservative. But now we're going to take that to the next step logically and say that what if you filled the whole liter with preservative? Or if you built a storehouse, but you didn't put anything in it. And so you just have an empty silo and you spend all your time building the silo, decorating the silo, painting it, smoothing it, and you never put anything into it. That would be very foolish. And that's comparable to a person that spends all their time just involved in limudei musar, yirat shamayim, and never actually learning Torah, which is halacha, gemara, psukim. If they're all day just learning sifrei musar, so it's like you're building a storehouse and not putting anything into it. So that's where he's coming from this evening. So he's starting, look at this mashal, these two mashalim that Chazal used, be'inyan ha-Torah ve'yira. We're talking about the interaction between Torah and Yira. Hifech me'asher shagu bazeh, kama me'rabat b'nei amenu. And it's the opposite of what some people have erred in this issue. Shekoivim kol esek limudam besifrei yira umusar levad. That some of these people, again, we've talked about this historical period, the early 1800s. You have a rising Hasidic movement, and you have people who are embracing Musar and Sfarim of Yirat Shamayim with all their time. They love that. They love learning those things, and it's hard to learn Gemara. It's dry to learn Halacha. So they're spending all their time. They're called Esek Limudam B'Sifrei Yira Musar, and they're missing it. They're missing the boat, okay? Because they're building a storehouse of Yira but they're not putting anything into it. So that's where he's coming from. Shekemo be'inyan kedima sa'otzar lehatvua shebesoicho. Just like you have to first build the storehouse before you can put stuff in it. V'kiyale klal alev adam. Kevan shekol kiyum b'shimur hatvua hu ha'oitzer. Yaso kol zmano o rubo bebinyan ha'oitzer levad. Could anybody think such a thing? That because you understand the importance of building the storehouse, therefore you're going to spend all or most of your time just building without ever putting anything into it, v'lo yachnis bo tvua me'olam, and then never put any grain in there? Kain eich alev ish. So too, how could it occur to anybody lomar shezet tachlis ha'adam Yisrael? So you see here, he's not necessarily criticizing the individual that chooses to learn a lot of Yirat Shamayim, but how can you say, he's talking to someone who says, as like a Shita, that this is their idea of, this is the tachlis of a Jew, to spend his time learning Yirat Shamayim. So Reb Chaim Volozhiner says, how could you say that? It's like a person who would build a storehouse for grain and never put any grain into it. That doesn't make any sense. That can't possibly be that the Tachlis Ha'adam Yisrael is just to learn Sifrei Yira. Sheyasim kol kvias limudo bebinyan ha'oitzar shel Yirat Shamayim levad v'hu otzar reik. He builds the building and he leaves it empty. V'lo alta biyado mikol amalo rak mitzvah achat. So what will this person have for all his efforts? One single mitzvah, which is a great mitzvah. Shel Hashem Elokecha Tira, fear of God. Beautiful. But that's all he'll have. He won't have mitzvahs Talmud Torah. V'gam ein alea shem oitzer klal. So it won't even be called a storehouse because there's nothing in it. If there's nothing in the storehouse, then it's not storing anything. Steve, what do you think?
You think he's just doing that to amuse himself? I mean, if he's really, Musar can really be effective in some way, no? I mean, why do you have to just have gym class for the rest of the day or something like that? Suit up. How do you have Yiras Shamayim and not do any other mitzvahs of learning? That's a stretch for me.
There are people like this. And there are people like this. I do recognize this character. There's a guy in yeshiva, or especially in Baal Tshuva yeshiva. In Baal Tshuva yeshiva, it's hard to learn Gemara because you don't have the skills, right?
Tell me about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're coming late to the game, and you're put into this deep intellectual challenge in a foreign language, and it's like three-dimensional chess, and you don't know what's going on. And instead, you could read English books about love of God and how righteous the Gedolim are and were, and you'll spend all day enriching yourself in Yirat Shamayim, but you won't actually grow as a Talmid Chacham, as a person who has Yediyas HaTorah, because you like the stories. You read the beautiful stories about all the great Jews over the history, but that's not mitzvahs Talmud Torah. So it's important to gain Yirat Shamayim and perspective and values. So again, we're definitely not negating that that's an important pursuit, but it can't be the only and not even the main. It has to be just
it's surprising that. So he thinks that anyone who focuses on Musar doesn't necessarily learn. I mean, I think that's an over criticism. I personally started out with Yiras Shamayim big time. I was almost paralyzed for a long time with it, and I needed to. I knew nothing about it. I didn't know the difference between Moses and Charlton Heston, and I wasn't joking about that. So I was starting from scratch, except with Yiras Shamayim, and just starting with that made me sign up for every class imaginable while I was still working. But I I couldn't put Yiras Shamayim into perspective. I became too intense about it and panicked. Like I thought God was a good sport for letting me to continue to exist. And I wasn't sure I could trust how long that would be. So as somebody who started with that, I can't imagine people just focusing on Yiras Shamayim and not doing anything with it. That's all.
Okay.
I'm really, I guess I'm part of the opposition in this class.
Every group needs an opposition, so we appreciate that you're playing that role. But but again, we're talking about sort of a choice of curriculum. Think about your Rosh Yeshiva and how do you build your day. So if you're in a Hasidic yeshiva, you may have like 3 Musar Sdarim, or you spend hours on Hasidus and stuff like that. And if you're in a Litvish yeshiva, you'll grant a 30-minute Musar Seder. But the main focus of your studies have to be acquisition of Torah knowledge and sharpening of intellectual skills to analyze the Torah and to enter into, quote, the mind of God. So that's what he's talking about, of focus and emphasis. And even though he's now spent a few chapters talking about the importance of Yirat Shamayim, but you can't just build the storehouse without filling it up with the grain. And the
Would you
grain,
say
the
would you
Torah.
say
Yes.
the all these emunah shirim fall into that category as well? Especially with women, I see all this emunah stuff, and I don't know. I tend to run the other direction, but would that be similar to?
That's what he's talking about. Shimon, we call that stuff Vaibisha Torah, right? That's women's stuff, right? So women don't have it's Talmud Torah the same way men do. They need to know the laws that are relevant to them, but they're not, they don't. It's not incumbent upon them to spend their time learning Gemara and things like that. So if they want to go to shiurim in chizuk and emuna and yira and so forth, that's okay for women. He's not even thinking about that, Reb Chaim Volashin, because his women were working really hard to milk the cow and make butter and so forth. But our women have some time to, pursue intellectual pursuits, and so I think that's okay. For the
It's more
women.
ruchani. It's more
Yes,
ruchani.
yes. And frankly, to be honest, let's be brass tacks about it. Um, it appeals to the heart more than the mind, right?
Yeah.
The Yirat Shamayim stuff is about your feelings and your love of God, your fear of God. And the Gemara, as I said, can be dry. It's very cerebral. It's intellectual analysis. And so people who are more feelings oriented, more emotional, which the statistics say, I don't want to get in gender trouble here, but in terms of MBTI, people who are emotional or people who are rational, using those in sort of a generic way, in MBTI in Myers-Briggs, F's are feeling and T's are thinkers, and 2/3 of women are feelers and 2/3 of men are thinkers. So there is gender difference between the feminine persona is softer and more emotional and more appreciative of the stories and the Yirat Shamayim stuff. And the male testosterone-driven, cerebral, competitive spirit of men is a more rational approach. So I like you said that women want to go to shiurim in Emuna and Yira, that fits. And Reb Chaim Voloshin, right? These Litvishers, this is spitz, mind stuff. There's a word they use in the yeshiva today. It's called kalters, for people who are very cold and intellectual. And that's a certain yeshivish persona where it's very unemotional and very cerebral. And that's how my boys in the Chevron Yeshiva, that's how they are. And that's what's looked up to, is being a kalter, is being cold and intellectual.
Well,
Anyway,
it's kind of like
yeah,
it's like they're the scientists of Torah, It's
exactly,
not
exactly.
it's
The
not
science
about
of Torah.
not about warm and fuzzy. And
Exactly right. You're
I'm
exactly
so
on.
glad I'm so glad I have like a safe space for my misogyny. I come here and can relish in it.
As long as the door is closed, your wife's upstairs, everything's
It
fine.
is.
Okay. So Chaim Volozhin continues. V'lo kivnu razal b'ma'amaram hanal Ein lo lakadosh baruch hu ela oitzer shel yirat shamayim bilvad. Okay, now he has a challenge. There's this statement that he used before that what does God have in the world? What he has is the storehouse of Yirat Shamayim. So that makes it sound like that's all you need, Yirat Shamayim. That's what God has. The lo kivnu el oiso hayira shebetocha munachim hamon tuot. Let's see. But lo kivnu razab maram zal ein lo kadosh baruch hu el oiso shel yishir shamayim bavad el oiso hayira shebetocha munachim hamon tuot. Mikra mishnah halachot sharei inyanei haTorah. Shehayira hi otzaram hatoiv umishameret shitkaimu etzlam. So, okay. So, in other words, when Chazal say the only thing Hashem has in the world is his oitzar, his treasury of Yirat Shamayim, it means the treasury of Yirat Shamayim that's full of grain. It's full of the grain, the produce. The produce is the Bible, the Mishnah, halachos, and the rest of the Torah. The Yira, that is the space, that's the oitzar, hatoiv, that maintains and protects. Arukim v'shnunim befiv, v'charusim aluach libo. But where the Torah is, it's in your mouth, it's on your heart. K'moshe muchach umuchrach v'mashekasuv. Od. There's another Maimer Chazal which says, Ein lo lakadosh baruch hu ba'olamo, ela Dalet amos shel halacha bilvad. So which is it? This says, Ein lo lakadosh baruch hu ela oitzer shel yirat shamayim bilvad. And this says, Ein lo lakadosh baruch hu ba'olamo, ela Dalet amos shel halacha bilvad. So the reconciliation that Reb Chaim Volozhiner is offering is that this oitzer of yirat shamayim means that it's full of Torah. So it is a treasury that's full of stuff. And what is that stuff? The Dalet Amos Shel Halacha, the halachas and the Gemara and everything else. So don't think that all that Hashem wants is Yirat Shamayim. No, he wants the oitzer of Yirat Shamayim, which is full of Torah. B'kiyadua b'shoresh dvar inyan beisa b'chino shel Torah v'Yirat Shamayim. The midos el yoinim. Now he goes up high. He goes up into the upper realm of divinity, and he talks about Torah and Yirat Shamayim. And he makes them into a masculine and a feminine persona. Shebechinas hayira leisle migarma klum. Ki hi nikiya ba'a Rakshi oitzer beis kibul hashefa elyon mibichinat Torah. Basically, what he's doing, he's saying that the yira is the feminine and the Torah is the masculine. So just like in a relationship between a man and a man comes and brings something and gives it to his wife, and she turns it into a baby. So in this relationship between Yirat Shamayim is space. It's a heichal. It's a sanctuary. It's an otzar, which is space, right? Women create space. Le'olam lo karasi le'ishti ela beisi. I called my wife my house. My wife is my house. She's my world. She's my space. And the man is bringing himself, his stuff, into her space. Okay? That's the masculine-feminine dualism that he's talking about here. And
Didn't they use tent, ohel? Wasn't there an expression, I think, in Bereshit?
Minashim ba'ohel.
Ba'ohel, yeah.
And we say, Ayeh Sarah Ishtecha Hinehi ba'ohel. And Vayaratz Avram Ohala, he runs to the tent. Right. So yes, a tent is another reference. There's another pasuk Shimon where Kodesh Baruch Hu says to the Jewish people after Mount Sinai, Shuvu lachem le'ohalechem. And to Moshe Rabbeinu, Vata po amodi madi. So by telling the Jewish people to return to their tents, that's a reference actually to a heter tashmi shamita, that they had been separated from their wives for 3 days, and now they received the Torah, they can go back to regular marital life. And that's called ohel. Your wife is your tent, and being together with her in the actual tent. So that's what we're talking about here. The Torah and Yirat Shamayim. In Midas El Yoinim, that the Yira is the space, but it's sort of empty space. He Nikia, and it creates space for the Shefa, and the Shefa is Mibchinas HaTorah. And now he quotes a pasuk in Habakkuk. Kmo shekasav Hashem behechel kodsho. Okay, and I actually want to put that up on the screen. Hashem behechel kodsho. V'Hashem behechel kodsho hasmi panav kol haaretz. But God in the holy abode, be silent before God, all the earth. Has is a word like sh, has. Has mi panav kol haaretz. Let me put Rashi up here. Hashem behechel kodsho muchan li para. God is in his sanctuary, ready to interact and perhaps punish. Has mi panav kol haaretz. Has lashon shituk v'dmimat churban. Hashem is ready to silence and maybe destroy. So it has to do. What I want to talk about now is the shame Yud Kei Vav Kei in relationship to the shame Adnus Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. Let me start by pointing out, and this comes from the Kabbalists. I've seen it in a few places. The word Has, the Magalamukos has it, and others have it, is the gematria 65. 65 is the gematria of Adnus, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud. Nun and Yud are 60, and Aleph and Dalet are 5, so 65. So Has corresponds to Adnus. There's another word here, Heichal. Heichal is also 65, okay? And 65 is Adnus. Now the word Heichal, which means sanctuary, think about the word Adon, okay? But think about the Adanim in the Mishkan. The Adanim in the Mishkan are sockets in which you put the wooden boards of the Mishkan. They go into an Adan, into Adanim. And so the Shem Adnus is related to Adanim, which are space holders. They're sockets. And that has to do with the word Heichal. Okay? This is a conceptual thing. The Shem Adnus, which we could talk about the mastery. The Adon is the master of the world. That name of God, he's the boss, he's the king, he's the master of the world. That is a chamber, a sanctuary for the Shem Hashem. So the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei is being housed, contained within the sanctuary of the Shem Adnus. Okay? So we have interaction here between Yud Kei Vav Kei and the Shem Adnus, between the number 26 and the number 65. And this is like a masculine and feminine thing, okay? Where Yud Kei Vav Kei is like a masculine presence in the Heichal, in the sanctuary, the empty space of the Shem Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, okay? So we're talking about, yes.
I'm sorry.
Go
Do you
ahead.
think Heichal is related to the word like Mechil,
Absolutely.
like containing?
Exactly.
Oh, it is?
For sure.
It is related? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, and a sanctuary is a holy container, right? It's a holy place. It contains Kedusha. So, and we're saying that has the same gematria as the Shem Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, which is like a container for the holiness of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Okay?
Okay.
So, Chaim Volozhiner is now relating that to this Otsar of Yirat Shamayim, this Otsar, which is also holy space. That's a feminine thing. That's Yirat Shamayim. And what is put into it is Torah. Okay? So this relationship between Yud Kei Vav Kei and Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, Vashem beheichal kodsho hasmi panav kol haaretz. That is what he's talking about here. K'moshe kosu Vashem beheichal kodsho, and look in the Zohar about that. Okay, and one more pasuk he brings about it. V'zema shekasav in Mishlei, toiv me'at beyiras Hashem me'oitza rav umehuma bo. So another pasuk. I've opened it up here. Oh, what happened to it? Here it is. Toiv me'at beyiras Adonai me'oitza rav umehuma boy. We'll start with pshat in this pasuk. The pshat is better a little with fear of the Lord than great wealth with confusion. So this is talking about a person who doesn't have a lot of stuff. He's a poor man. He has ma'at, he has a little bit, but he's achieved everything he has b'yiras Hashem. Like it says, Ashrei anene miyagias kapav yoiser miyayare shemayim, because it says Ashrecha v'toivlach. Anyway, this is a person who has ma'at b'yiras Hashem, and that is better than oitzer rav, than a great storehouse, but muhumabo, there's turmoil, confusion, striving. A lot of rich people have this. They have a lot of stuff, but they're involved in a lot of lawsuits. They have a lot of headaches. There's a lot of people they've stepped on and people that are trying to step on them, and they're living in a world of sharks. So it's better, at least in some respects, and from a religious perspective, to have a little bit, but to have it be Yiras Hashem, than to have an oitzer rav, but a total balagan of a life. And that's for sure true. And there are a lot of people who have a lot, but their life is a mess. So that's the Pashup Shah in this pasuk in Mishlei. But that's not what HaHaim Volozhiner wants from it. Remember, we're talking about an oitzar, okay? And our oitzar is Yirat Shemayim. And so he's explaining it differently. Let me start with Rashi. Toiv ma'at b'yiras Hashem oitzer rav mehumabo kol bnei adam tzoakim. People are screaming. Shenaseh ha'otzar. This treasury has been made from gezel, v'chomas, from stealing and other usury and violence. Kemo v'ro mehumas rabois b'soicha v'ashukim b'kirba. Abused people are in it. So much better to have a little bit b'yiras Hashem than a palace, a treasure, great wealth, but people screaming and feeling abused by it. But what HaHaim Volozhin wants is the following idea. It has a dual meaning. It's been translated here. Better a little gained through fear of God than a storehouse with empty turmoil within it. That's how Rabbi Frankel translated. Let me explain how I understand it. It is better to have a little bit of Yiras Hashem, okay? Because remember, we've said Yiras Hashem is very important, but really it should only be, it's a container, but it's sort of a small part of your curriculum, your syllabus. You got to spend most of your time learning Torah. So the ma'at b'yiras Hashem me'oitza rav. If you try to build a giant storehouse of Yirat Shemayim without putting grain of Torah into it, all you really have is mehumabo. It'll be a balagan. It'll be emptiness. It'll be nothingness, confusion. So this pasuk in Drash, according to HaHaim Volozhin, is saying it's good to put a little bit into Yiras Hashem, better than putting a lot into Yiras Hashem and ending up with an empty storehouse that'll only be full of confusion, instead of the proper way, which is to build a storehouse and fill it with Torah, okay, which is learning Gemara and Halacha and all other things. So that was the message for tonight, that Yirat Shemayim is really important, and you need to give it its due, but its due has to be limited and assigned its proper proportion. You need to build an oitzer of Yiras Hashem, But your oitzar, you can't spend all your time just building. You got to spend time filling the oitzar with content. And the content is limud Torah, the Dalet Amos Shel Halacha, learning Gemara and Halacha and Psukim and Chumash and Navi and all those things. So Baruch Hashem, that was this chapter in the Nefesh HaHaim. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Looking forward to it. Next week I'm traveling, so probably won't get together, but I'll keep in touch with you.
You're going this week, right?
I'm going on Wednesday night, Thursday.
It'll include, okay, so we'll skip next Monday.
That's what I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel Colton.